Give us 12 seconds. Welcome to the 2010 Tabula Poetica Poetry Reading Series. We're happy to have you all here this evening, and we hope that you'll return for our other poetry events this fall. Our next visiting poet is on September 28th, and that's Patty Seaburn. You can find more details about the whole series on our website, and you can get there through Chapman's website, or our Facebook group. So join our Facebook group to find out all the latest information. Please take a moment to turn your cell phones off or silence them. Please sign the guest book as well. I think that should have arrived. That'll be out in the lobby area outside this reading room. So if you came to the reading, we'd like to know who you are and how many you are, and maybe whether you're a student or a visitor from off campus. In addition, as I mentioned a few moments ago, Barnes & Noble is here at the back of this room with the books by Rae Armantrout and also other poets in the series. And I'll go off script for just a second here. If you can afford to buy a poetry book, and clearly you're here because you're a fan of poetry, I urge you to go ahead and purchase one because it matters, especially in this economy and the state of publishing as we're transitioning in some ways from the print to the electronic versions. I think it's really important to think about poetry books as art or artifacts and appreciate them in that way and support them through the purchase of books. I want to thank the English department and our chair, Patrick Fury, who's somewhere there. Patrick Fury, they've been tremendously supportive of Tabula Poetica. I also want to thank poets and writers because they gave us small external grants for each of the visiting poets' stipends, so that was very important to the whole series. I appreciate Logan Esdale's continuing contributions to this project. He's been a great partner to work with in this series. Tabula Poetica's graduate assistant, Natalie Dauvet, is she here yet? I think she broke a sandal, so she's running a little late. Natalie and our admin in the department, Jennifer Klunk, have done a lot of work to make sure this poetry series happened. And thanks to Charlene Baldwin, who just walked in. She's Dean of Leatherby Libraries, and this is her home that we've been welcomed into this evening. Tonight, we have a special guest to introduce Rae Armantrout. Jim Doty has been Chapman University's president since 1991 and holds the Donald Bren Distinguished Chair in Business and Economics. One might think that a business guy, a numbers man, a money guy, wouldn't have an interest in poetry. On the contrary, from the start of this project less than 2 years ago, President Doty has cheered on Tabula Poetica as a center for poetry here and has supported its goals to fortify the liberal arts at Chapman University, strengthen our MFA and MA graduate programs, encourage creative activity and accomplishment, and reach across disciplinary boundaries. Please help me welcome President Jim Doty.
Thank you very much, Anna, and thank you for inviting me to present this introduction. I don't think, was Patrick Quinn introduced? He's he's keeping a real low profile. I saw him in the back, way back. Patrick? Great to have our Dean of the Wilkinson College here. We have two deans, along with Charlene Baldwin, who's Dean of our library, who's already been introduced. This is great to see so many people here to hear poetry. And now, of course, we have one of the most distinguished poets in the world, so that certainly helps. But I just think this is great, and I know it wouldn't happen if there weren't someone I consider an entrepreneur on this campus. I know everyone usually thinks of an entrepreneur as someone who starts a business, makes a ton of money, but I think of an entrepreneur as a change agent, someone who can be a leader in bringing people together in a common cause. And I know a number of you are students in courses in poetry. Maybe you're required to be here, but not most of you. Most of you I know are here because you love poetry. And that's, I think, is terrific. But Anna, I want to thank you, Professor Lee, for her leadership and all that she's made possible here. And I think it's great that she's now a tenured professor here at Chapman University. Just a few things about her. In addition to the poetry reading series, the Tabula Poetica is the Center for Poetry at Chapman, of course, but it reaches out to our community through projects like our students helping to judge the California Coastal Commission's Poetry Contest for K-12. And I also want to say that in addition to being a tenured member of the faculty, Professor Leahy was also conferred an Excellence Award in Services by Chapman University just this last spring. And she's also, I know, she's been involved in developing the homepage. I know I did a poetry reading, and if I did, that means that a lot of other people were involved as well. And I think that's fantastic. So thank you again. But thank you also for making it possible to bring such a distinguished poet to our campus. My goodness, a Pulitzer Prize winner. Is absolutely incredible. She won that for, or I guess she was particularly, she was honored for her work for her book Verse, which I see right here. Let me just hand it out because you may want, are more copies of this available for sale? And will you be signing them later? Fantastic, great. I will get a copy. I went on the web today to see if I can find a poem. I don't know if any of you else are free way to get a poem, I guess. Always looking for a deal. And I found some wonderful accolades. She's got groupies all over the place, all over the country, the world, writing in about her poetry. And one of them complained that, why can't we get any free poems on the web? But I did find one. I found Soft Money, which was very, very interesting. But I guess if you like to read her poetry, buy her book and get it signed. I think it's a great deal. Let me tell you a little bit more about her. She was also the only third poet in history to win 2 of 3 of the biggest American poetry prizes in the same year. She was a Guggenheim Fellow back in 2008. Her other books include Next Life, Up to Speed, Veiled, New and Selected Poems. And her poems have appeared in the Best American Poetry in 4 separate years. That's incredible accomplishment. There's even a critical book, an entire book that's been written about her work. I hope it's not too critical, called A Wild Salience. She's at the center of the first generation of language poets. This group came of age in the 1970s, in the days of the Vietnam War. Language poets came to understand, this is something I did not know, to understand that words and sentences don't always clear things up or present absolute truths or beauty. In a recent interview, she said that she started writing poems in kindergarten. I love this story. But it wasn't until she went to college that she, quote, realized it was possible for living people to be poets. So they're not just dead white guys that are writing poetry. They're new, vibrant, incredible people writing poetry too, and hopefully you as students can be similarly inspired to follow your passion, follow your dream, and become a poet. In the same interview, she says that she often starts with a question or puzzle, so that writing a poem is a way of figuring something out about the world or herself or both. Writing poems allows Rae Armantrout to be active in the world around her and to make her a thinking part of the world as well. I just have a quote that I found on the web. It was by Robert Creeley. He said, "I don't think there's another poet writing who is so consummate in authority and yet so generous to her readers and company alike. Ladies and gentlemen, please join with me to welcome to the Chapman University campus, Professor Armantrout. Useful thing I've done all day.
I don't think I've ever been introduced by the president of a university before, so thank you, sir. Deans, yes. Presidents, no. All right, so I'm going to read some poems from Versed, which is my most recent book, and then some newer work. I'm going to start with a poem that you already heard if you came to my talk, but most of you didn't, so it'll be new to you. A resemblance. As a word is mostly connotation, matter is mostly aura, halo, the same loneliness that separates me from what I call the world. Quiet, ragged skirt of dust encircling a ceramic gourd. Lookalikes, are you happy now? Would I like a vicarious happiness? Yes, though I suspect yours of being defective, forced. Outer. Dolls as celebrities, Barbie. Celebrities as dolls. I'm the one who can't know if the scraggly old woman putting a gallon of vodka in her shopping cart feels guilty, defiant, or even glamorous as she does so. She may imagine herself as an actress playing an alcoholic in a film. Removal activates glamour. To see yourself as if from the outside, though not as others see you. Carried by light, images remain, while sensation is so evanescent as to be always beyond belief. The outer world means State Farm, donuts, taekwondo, thoughts as spent fuel rods, preceded and followed by statuesque shadows of cacti on a lawn. Today could be described as a retired man humming tunelessly to himself. When I ask what you're thinking, you say, about explaining to children the best way to build a maypole. That'll teach me to ask someone what he's thinking. You never know. Scumble. What if I were turned on by seemingly innocent words such as scumble, pinky, or extrapolate? What if I maneuvered conversation in the hope that others would pronounce these words? Perhaps the excitement would come from the way the other person touched them lightly and carelessly with his tongue. What if of were such a hot button? Scumble of bushes. What if there were a hidden pleasure in calling one thing by another's name? Presto. Breaking Anna Nicole news as she buries her son. What do you want to be? Skeleton suits and Superman outfits, inappropriate touching on drugstore racks. Presto, pairs of flies retie the old knot midair. Blonde wigs and wizard caps. I want to go back. Invisible knot. I want to be that. That's my Halloween poem. New. If yellow is the new black, the new you is a cartoon, spokesman who blows his lines around bumptious 3D Hondas, apologizes often, and remains cheerful. The new pop song is about getting real. You had a bad day. The camera don't lie. But they're lying to you about the camera. Since Fallujah is the new Antigua, sunlight nibbles on pre-charred terrain in the electric fireplace. And then, about midway through this book, towards the end of the first part, it's in 2 parts, I was suddenly diagnosed with cancer and had a very serious surgery, and it was, a very serious cancer. That was over 4 years ago, and it hasn't come back, so I'm not, trying to get, it's not a pity party here, but it sort of explains what I'm going to read next, because it takes a sort of dark turn. This next part, the prose poem, On Your Way, the images in it were mostly taken from the Egyptian Book of the Dead, and it was the first poem that I wrote when I came home from the hospital. On your way. On your way to the sea of reeds, you will meet the soul-devouring demon. You've heard it all before, and you believe it. Why not? Why would they lie? You must wear the beetle amulet to avoid being consumed. But it's also true that you can't really know until it's actually happening. So you have a sort of knowledge which, even if later confirmed in each detail, is still not real knowledge. He will weigh your heart, and if it's too heavy, you'll be swallowed up. What is this extra element that is mingled in when you arrive at the ordained spot? Around. Time is pleased to draw itself out, permit itself pendulous loops, to allow them meaning, this meaning, as it goes along. Chuck and I are pleased to have found a spot where my ashes can be scattered. It looks like a construction site now, but it's adjacent to a breathtaking rocky coast. Chuck sees places where he might snorkel. We're being shown through by a sort of realtor. We're interested but can't get her to fix the price. The future is all around us. It's a place, any place, where we don't exist. So the middle part of that was a dream, and it is kind of a funny dream. It's not really like Chuck was saying, oh, this is a place I could snorkel. So even though this is talking about cancer, it's still okay to giggle at it if you want to. Dark matter. And it's not all about cancer from here on, but it comes in and out, okay? Dark matter. Who am I to experience a burst of star formation? I know this. After the first rush of enthusiasm, any idea recedes and dims. Each one is the inverse shape of what's missing. One might try summing the matter up in a single Judas kiss, all bittersweet complicity and feigned ignorance. This one is dedicated, I'm going to read simple, dedicated to my son, Aaron Korkegian, who's a biologist, and so we were talking about evolution. He's not really an evolutionary biologist, but still, he didn't like the way, he thought that I was using anthropomorphic terms to describe evolution. And, it's not like I'm an intelligent design person or something, but it's just sort of hard to talk about anything without using the language of agency, I guess. And so the poem kind of grows out of that, and also out of the fact that I was still in a pretty pessimistic state of mind, and wasn't really high on, what biology had done for us as living organisms at that moment. So anyway, simple. Complex systems can arise from simple rules. It's not that we want to survive, it's that we've been drugged and made to act as if we do. while all the while the sea breaks and rolls painlessly under. If we're not copying it, we're lonely. Is this the knowledge that demands to be passed down? Time is made from swatches of heaven and hell. If we're not killing it, we're hungry. The racket. It's as if the real thing, your own absence, can never be uncovered. Each actor's face seems to have survived the same brave battle to remain in character. They are posed on the rubble used to indicate the past. It turns out this is heaven. In the present, cancer sets up a free market in your gut. The fog lifts and the birds start in. Each works to replace itself with a bit of racket. Integer. One what? One grasp? No hands. No collection of stars. Something dark pervades it. Metaphor is ritual sacrifice. It kills the look-alike. No, metaphor is homeopathy. A healthy cell exhibits contact inhibition. These temporary credits will no longer be reflected in your next billing period. Dark meaning not reflecting, not amenable to suggestion. And then, on a somewhat lighter note, or at least not directly about cancer, there's a prose poem called Remaining that's in 2 parts. It might be 1976. Hotel California is on every sound system. It tells us we're jaded, which is oddly terrific. This isn't going to take long at all. Been there, done that, we will soon say. Tried to find the door. Futility features a soaring solo. My parents are calling. I Love Lucy is about to start. It's funny the way Lucy wants to go too, do what Desi does. She wheedles and schemes. Her efforts, however, are not as impressive as Wile E. Coyote's. When he fails, human ingenuity is foiled. Now Lucy is getting a laugh. She and little Ricky can't open the door. Actually, I know that it was really great, but I used to hate I Love Lucy because it was so depressing for me as a girl, because it was like, all Lucy wants to do is get out and work. She wants to get out and have some kind of career, or she wants to, go where her husband goes, and she's always foiled, it's always a terrible failure. So I guess that's a feminist poem sort. Hoop. God twirled across the face of what cannot be named, since it was not moving. God was momentum then, that impatience with interruption, stamping time's blanks with its own image. Now her theme will be that she has escaped certain destruction, that she is impossibly lucky. This theme should be jaunty but slightly discordant, coming in, as it does, so late. The character associated with this theme should be dressed in markedly old-fashioned clothing, a hoop skirt perhaps, while everyone else is in cutoffs, ready for the barbecue. Now that one's a little grim, well, it's funny. And this will be the last one from the book. Anchor. Widely expected, if you will, cataclysm. Things I'd say, and saying, to persons no longer present. Yards away, trim junipers make their customary bows. Oh, no thank you to any of it. If you watch me from increasing distance, I am writing this always. So then I have a book coming out in January that's called Moneyshot. No, it's not totally about what you're thinking, or you may be thinking, but more about, and we have an economist right here, interestingly, more about, you know, the financial situation that we've been in for the last couple of years as that has sort of come across my radar. So it's not that, like, First is not all about cancer. Moneyshot is not all about money, Wall Street, working, not working, etc. But those themes do come in various ways, so I think you'll hear that. Working models. For this one, you sort of have to be familiar with a certain television show to get the beginning, but oh well, we'll see. Working models. A diversity noir hit in which a shapeshifter and a vampire run rival drinking establishments. Demons handle routine tasks once we're in the zone, tagged and released into the workforce. Chicks are forced to find food, grains scattered among pebbles, while monitoring for the appearance of a model predator. Apes can mind read, studies show. What makes us human is our tendency to point. I have heard that. They keep making it smaller and smaller, what makes us human. Used to be, you know, we could make tools, but now ravens can do them. And don't even get us started about parrots. Anyway. Okay, fuel. The sun on my back, like your hand at night in bed, and then again your hand on my back at night, like the sun has burned through 2/3 of its fuel. That you adorn the fallen, that your heads and shafts are smooth, cool, a spongy marble, that you are stock still and spontaneous at once, that you are one, as we always thought we knew. And this next poem kind of is in a set with that one. It sort of refers back to the one I just read a little bit. The gift. You confuse the image of a fungus with the image of a dick in my poem, understandably, and 3 days later, a strange toadstool, white shaft, black cap, 5 inches tall, appears between the flagstones in our path. We note the invisible web between fence posts in which dry leaves are gently rocked. And this one gets more back to the money theme, bubble wrap. Want to turn on CNN, see if there have been any disasters? In the dream, you slip inside me. Ponzi scheme, rhyme scheme. The child wants his mother to put her head where his is, see what he sees. In the dream, inside the dream, our new roommates are arguing. These are not AstroTurf calls, and we're all populists now. Now an engine's single indrawn breath, the black hole at the heart of it is taking it all back. An immigrant sells scorpions of twisted electrical wire in front of the Rite Aid. I really did see that. That's not something you would make up. And it was kind of right about the time that the stock market lost half its value. And I was thinking, well, maybe this is the new economy. Answer. A moment of stillness demanding an answer. When does a moment end? Starbucks prayer. Make morning good again. Leaf shadows on pavement. word meaning to slide, carelessly, repeatedly, to absent-mindedly caress. For I so loved the world that I set up my only son to be arrested. By the way, that is not about my son Aaron. That is a reference to Christianity in case we're also post-Christian and we don't get that. Ground. Custom content feed. Let me tell you something personal. As a child, I worried about quicksand. I don't know why I mention this. I feel no connection to the child who had that fear, instilled, as it was, by 50s films about explorers, hokey and tainted now. I hold out my hand. Brownian motion, primal shudder, the way it's hotter to go to bed with someone while imagining yourself to be another person. And here's the poem that the president referred to, Soft Money. Soft money. They're sexy because they're needy, which degrades them. They're sexy because they don't need you. They're sexy because they pretend not to need you, but they're lying, which degrades them. They're beneath you, and it's hot. They're across the border, rhymes with dancer, they don't need to understand. They're content to be not mean, which degrades them and is sweet. They want to be the thing in itself and the thing for you. Miss thing, but can't. They want to be you, but can't, which is so hot. It's about bad sexual stuff. Anyway, outage. We like to think that the mind controls the body. We send the body on a mission. We don't feel the body, but we receive conflicting reports. The body is catching flack or flies. The body is sprouting grapefruit. The body is underperforming in heavy trading. Reception is spotty. Someone just like me is born in the future, and I don't feel a thing. Like only goes so far. And this one is based on a fairy tale you'll probably recognize pretty soon. Errands. The old to and fro is newly cloaked in purpose. There's a jumble of hair and teeth under the bedclothes in the forest. The better to eat you with, it says, and nibbles us until we laugh. An axeman comes to help. Two birds cheep to greet whatever has come up. Two. Sway. Take breath. Sway. Caught up in the leaf, entranced, the carbon atom gets a life, but whose life is it? A slender whirlpool, momentary poppy, sways over a drain. Forget her, she doesn't love you, you will never have such grace. This is. If you can read this, you're too close. This has been specially handcrafted in Mexico. Hi, you'll do on a t-shirt made by young girls in Thailand. America poses in whose mirror? Irascible, insouciant. This is a 5-star trance. to have this vantage from the cliff's edge, to get drunk on indifference, to stare at a bright succession of crests raised from nothing and flattened. And this is the last one from this manuscript. Money talks. Money is talking to itself again in this season's bondage and safari look, its closeout camouflage. Hit the refresh button and this is what you get. Money pretending that its hands are tied. On a billboard by the 880, money admonishes, shut up and play. So then I'm starting a new manuscript, which is, I think, going to be called Severance Package. So we'll just see how far we get in this. The first poem, it kind of helps to think about a couple of Bible stories, like maybe the Sermon on the Mount, and maybe also the way that Jehovah spoke to Moses from out of a burning bush. And, I was raised on that stuff, so not everyone was, but anyway, this is not exactly either of those things, but it helps to have that in the back of your mind. Scripture. Your violins pursue the downhill course of streams, even to their wild curls and cowlicks. To repeat is not to catch. Consider the hummingbirds, how they're gussied up and monomaniacal as the worst or best of you. Consider the bright, streamlined emergency they manifest. My leaves form bells, top knots, small cups of sex, overweening, unstoppered. Not one of you, with all your practice, is so extravagantly coiffed. Old school. Pull strings taut and something like points reappear in the model. Take place. Momentum is conserved. Carry elementary clone world punctuation. Hostile. Fetus. Cancer is old school. Impersonal. Carry imperial aspirations. To aspirate is to breathe in and choke. Nobody wants this. Nobody did this to me, screams now blind Cyclops. Nobody's listening is conserved. And for you science geeks out there, this is one of a couple of really science-based poems. Dress up. To be dressed is to emit virtual particles. The spirit of renormalization is that an electron, all by itself, can have infinite mass and charge, but when it's dressed, a toddler stares at us till we look up. Flirtatious, we call it. She waits until we get the joke about being here, being there. Contrast. A skein of roots showing through soil, like veins on the back of a hand. Unlike veins, roots are searching for something. We'll know when they find it. The past is as strange as the future. In the future, you control your avatar. In the past, you can't, though you will feel what she feels. Entering the past in pairs is not recommended. The past is a single-player game. And then this is the other very sciencey one. This one is the one I was talking about, where I actually had lunch with a physicist before I wrote it, and yet, it's kind of silly too. So I had started writing something about the beginning of the universe, and then I thought, well, this is probably not true. So I decided to have lunch with this astrophysicist and talk to him about it, and he told me some things which confirmed that what I thought was not true. But, you know, then trying to make sense of what he said, you know, so. Anyway, accounts. Light was on its way from nothing to nowhere. Light was all business. Light was full speed. When it got interrupted. Interrupted by what? When it got tangled up and broke into opposite. Broke into brand new things. What kinds of things? Drinking cup, thinking of you, convenience valet. How could speed take shape? Hush, do you want me to start over? The fading laser pulse, information describing the fading laser pulse, is stored, is encoded in the spin states of atoms. God is balancing his checkbook. God is encrypting his account. This is taking forever. And this one I started on my vacation when I was at Bryce Canyon, but it's not all about that. My poems are usually never all about one thing. Haunts. Rock eaten to familiar shapes, heads cocked on jagged spines. How many orange, pink, white rock pinnacles are visible from here? Grandeur is that number plus distance, as if, again, could be made manifest. Nature was a 19th century fad, cousin to eugenics. In the 21st century, America's soft cores undead. On how many bookstore shelves, lovely fanged teenagers, red-eyed, smeared with blood. And this too comes from, well, partly from a documentary I saw, but partly from driving across the country, looking at stuff. Production. Crowds of racked spindles cannot cover desert floor. That throng of extras, hired mourners in costume. B-list snits as white noise. Old grievances are reenacted and aired, while fracking blasts gas from shale. Kid, scared of her own shadow, natch, that access denied body. And this one is about movies, kind of. Action poem. I thought if there could be action films, there could be an action poem. On screen, men discover that their mothers are imposters, that their world's unreal. Substitution is eerie. We discover this again. America has a lucid dream. She's falling from level to collapsing level in someone else's, whose, terrain, through floorboards, off bridges, firing desperately. Someone says, dream bigger, handing us an RPG. Midst. We're all saying the same thing now, scolding the same shadow, not in harmony, but in sync, or by turns, singing that bar about the flock taking off as if it were one body, as if this was one body, and who could be listening? All right, we're almost done now. Progress. The thickness of sleep, the sense of swarm, of nebulous propagation, from which we wake by narrowing, sharpening our focus. The three weird sisters are you, babbling in drag, and what's so strange about that? They foresee your downfall, but urge you on. Where is there to go but down? You want to go, don't you? If we think dying is like falling asleep, then we believe, wrongly, rightly, that it's a way of sinking into what happened, joining the program in progress. Bardos. Some say the soul hangs from the ceiling when the doctor pronounces the body dead, and afterwards, perhaps, watches crises in the lives of strangers, bored as we are here. Let volumes speak volumes. One claims he can recreate the sound of a family argument using bankrupt fishermen and oil execs to represent dead relatives. One uses leathery maroon tongues writhing, laced up both sides with gray sharp-toothed spines. I've been telling someone, a cipher, emphatically, how unfair it is that so-and-so, a killer, is angry at his boyfriend, girlfriend, unclear, for being a truck stop whore when... Just two more. Real time. Now the screen shows the tops of clouds, roiling in time-lapse photography. She is in the wood-lawn room. It's a green cube where a large ceramic frog in jodhpurs holds a lampshade up with its muscular arms. When time stands still, she hates herself. Even a black hole boils off. Outside, a voice says, "Ed, are you ready to go home?" She thinks it's ironic when remarks are not addressed to her. The cube hums to itself. Stop and go. This is the last one. Long burst of tweets. We wait to see if it picks up again from the same place. The place we came from. Stop. I know this one. It goes, everything's a metaphor for sensation. Okay.
I think we have time for a couple of questions. If there's any questions from the audience about any of the poems that Rae read, or questions about her writing process. The president has a question.
You're taking notes.
In a poem where you were exploring the idea of time, there's a final line which I found very interesting but didn't understand. If we aren't killing it, we're hungry, referring to time. Can you expand on that? Or?
Well,
Can you repeat that?
it was part of the poem "Simple," and
The line was, if we aren't killing it, we're hungry. That was the last line of the poem.
it was the whole poem had a lot to do with biology. It was the one where I was discussing evolution with my son. There's another line in it that goes, "If we're not copying it, we're lonely." So, copying would have to do with reproduction, I guess. And killing time, of course, is a common sort of saying that you hear. But sort of right behind that is the idea that if we're not killing things, we're hungry. So it's a sort of predatory, I guess, stance towards time. Since we are predators, we're always looking for the next thing to pounce on somehow. It's a kind of probably grim view of life.
Thank you.
Okay, anyone else? Yeah.
About your process, I know that you said that certain things would trigger you writing, obviously a poem, but they often have multiple things. Do you often do sort of snippets and then come back to it over multiple periods of time?
Yeah, I do.
So is that frequently how you come involved, or do you think most of them you have a concept and you sit down? Because the ones you read today, especially, they're relatively narrative. It seems like you could follow your process of thought, which I think they're great. But I just wanted to know if it's more common that you were to sit down and write it and then work it, or if you would come back and go like that?
I would still come back, like the one that called Simple that we were just talking about. Some of that came out of my conversation with Aaron, and then some of it was written. The part about I don't have it in my head totally, but you know, something about the sea rolling painlessly under. Well, I was actually on a boat when I wrote that, and I was looking at waves as they came off the wake of the boat. So, you know, it fits in because I was sort of thinking about life and death and how many things go under without feeling any pain, but human beings are not in that group. But, you know, so part of it started in our living room having a conversation. Later it picked up on a boat looking at waves. So, yeah, it was, I sort of experience things and see how they might be connected more than making them up. So I guess I'm not saying I never make anything up, but not very often. I think there are limits to my imagination. So I sort of have to wait for something and go, aha, that fits. Yeah.
I was intrigued by the term post-Christianity when you were talking about one of your poems. Do you think that's a movement in poetry right now? Or
No, God, no. No, that's just, I just find that, I think, you know, this is still a majority Christian country, but I think that we can't count on the kinds of literacy we used to be able to count on. That includes all kinds of literacy, but it also includes Bible references. Some people, you know, get Bible references and some don't. I'm not a practicing Christian, but I grew up with this stuff, so it's a literature that is familiar to me. And, you know, we used to all share that literature, and it sort of inspired a lot of eloquence. The King James Bible, and, you know, less so now. So I wasn't seriously saying that America is post-Christian, and heaven knows there's no such poetry movement, but I think it's more that people are post-literate than that's a post-Christian, which is sad, because if you're going to be a Christian, you should be at least literate too. But I was kind of kidding about that. Anybody else with a question? Yeah.
You were saying that was like part of your raising in your childhood. How often do you find that in your poetry, or is it just kind of at the back of your mind and you'll pull it out on occasion? Or?
It's in the back of my mind, but so are fairy tales, you know. I hope I don't offend anyone by putting those two things in the same category. But you know, they are stories, and those stories are familiar to me, so sometimes they pop up as a way of talking about something. Yeah.
How much does your fear of decreased audience literacy affect what you do and don't put in? Are there parts that you really like, but you think no one's going to get that? So you don't
I'm not like that. I pretty much write for myself and for my good writer friends, you know. That's just, and if, you know, I think if you actually write for an imaginary audience, it doesn't work. That's what I think. You have to do it somehow from what you're truly thinking. Yeah.
If you're not writing like a poem with a beginning, a traditional beginning, middle, and end, how do you know if it's finished?
Well, sometimes it takes a while to figure out something's finished. Sometimes there have been poems where there was one particular poem in 3 parts where I had the first 2 parts and I knew they were good, and I kept trying but it wasn't finished. I kept trying to come up with another part that would finish it off somehow. And I had, 4 or 5 different things in there, and I kept going, okay, now it's done. But then it wasn't. So that one took about 6 months to actually come up with something that nailed it. But, you know, when it was there, for me anyway. But, you know, sometimes it takes a while to realize that the thing you just wrote isn't really working. And you have to kind of, you know, let it sit for a little while, maybe. And of course not everything I do works for everyone by any means, you know. So I have an audience, but it's certainly not universal. So to get back to that other question, I just don't think you can try to write for a universal audience because you don't know those people. You don't know what they might get, what they might not get, and then you'd be like a Hollywood scriptwriter or something. You wouldn't really be a poet. I mean, one thing that I worry about in my poems, actually, that I think is a serious concern, but I do it anyway, is pop cultural references. Because there's always going to be somebody who gets the fairy tale stuff, let's say, or the biblical stuff, and will eventually fill in people who don't. But eventually there'll be people who don't know the movies or the songs that I bring in at all. No one will know them, they're gone, so stuff that works now, like that reference to True Blood, I don't know if that's going to work later, so. Yeah, okay.
Round of applause for Rae. Again, there are books for sale at the back of the room, and Rae will stick around for a little bit up here if you have a book that you want to have her sign. In addition, there are refreshments just outside if you'd like to mingle and talk poetry. Thank you all for coming out this evening.